Welcome. Welcome to PostGIS Day. It's so nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
You have the most, what's the word, mysterious talk title, I believe, of our set. Once Upon a Database, Telling Stories with PostGIS and QGIS. I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories.
Well, thank you.
Please share your screen and transport us to the...
See if I can find my stories. Where are they? Let's see. I think they're over here.
Here we go.
Just the wrong screen. Wait. There we go. I have to move all our faces first. Bear with me, folks. I've been doing this all week and you think it would get easier. It does not. Okay. Okay. So I'm good to go then?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, I'm going to introduce myself in just a slide. But I like Paul said, Once Upon a Database, Telling Stories with PostGIS and QGIS. I am a member of the National Press Club. I tell stories. I'm also a data scientist, so I tell stories. I also work as a human geographer, where I'm telling the stories of the people that live on these landscapes and within the topography and the areas like the census data we heard in the prior one. These are things that I migrated towards, and surprisingly enough, I came up in GIS by having a big question that I had to answer. I was working in public health and I looked at urban landscapes and I saw they were very instrumental in looking at patient outcomes. And it was a tool that I didn't know existed, that once I discovered it, I added to my arsenal. When you're a data scientist, knowing that there's another column of data that has geometry in it that you can empower your insights with was career changing in my instance. So, I spoke about all this stuff. I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I do all this kind of stuff. But I'm also a discoverer and I'm very curious. I'm an autodidact. So when I taught myself, how to use these tools, I actually wrote a book about it because I found there wasn't a book that spoke to me with the broad scope I needed to answer some of the big questions that I was challenged with, working with electronic medical records and, vast data from huge hospital systems, wanting to benefit the patients and figure out what type of data can lead to better outcomes. So recently I did a big project with the Brazilian rainforest, looking at deforestation, and not just in the way where you look at it, say, yeah, we're losing a lot of trees and it's the lungs of the planet. I wanted to get into the nitty gritty. And, I knew about OpenStreetMap, but I didn't know about GeoFabrique. And so I wanted to share this tool in case there's people there. The way my presentation is going to go is it's not highly technical. It's like a little pause between some of the technical stuff, because before you can get to all the SQL coding and Python and all that, you kind of have to find your data and you have to formulate some sort of a meaningful question, and you have to be able to tell it in an engaging way. Now we're going to go, I'm just going to briefly take you in here. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, which is Minds Behind Maps with Maxime. And one of the guests was talking about, I think, the NASA data. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to speak at the Open Data conference they had, I think it was back in September at NASA. So I was very interested in hearing that conversation, and he was talking about Puerto Rico, and I was thinking, like, why didn't I think about that? Because I teach, I do workshops, and I meet with a lot of community leaders, and Puerto Rico was definitely a lesson. I'm not going to be pontificating to you in public policy and all that, but let's think about that we have this territory that has no political representation in Congress, and then go look at some of the data that we can find about the condition of a place that had, hurricanes in 2017, 2 of them, earthquakes, lost their power grid, they got hit by the hurricanes that just happened. So as a foundational data set, it can be very informative. And here's where you click a PBF file. Now, the PBF added on to the OSM is very readable in QGIS. I do open source. Everything I do is open source. So I'm not sure how this integrates with other platforms like ArcGIS, but you know, the PBF, they're condensed, so you don't have to worry about the size, which is a concern for those of us who don't really work with enterprise software. So now, here's another problem I had to solve. I'm a Mac person, Mac through and through. I don't get the Windows thing. Praise to all of you that do, I don't. So a lot of times, especially when I stepped up to wanting to use things like PostGIS and things like that, there wasn't an easy straight road to like, well, how do I import the data? Windows has a little button, import data. It doesn't work with Mac OS. So this is more of a workflow conversation. So I got PostGIS on my computer, and PGAdmin is how I administer the database. And I just wanted to show you just really quickly a little bit about this tool in case it's not something that you're familiar with. And this is where I have to start to be able to integrate with QGIS. You need to create a database inside PGAdmin so that you can connect it with QGIS, and then the data can move between the two systems. So what I like, this has already been created, but if you wanted to create a database, easy peasy, create a database. They have something here called schemas, which are, I call them buckets, because I'm working on an 8-chapter book about SQL and geospatial. So I made each schema, each bucket, which you can control access to, is where all my data lives. So I just wanted to show you what this looked like, fully formed. One thing you have to remember when you're working here is you have to install the extension, which is just a create. You can see it's already here. But what you would do is you just go here, create extension. It's just create the.
Hey, Bonnie.
Yeah.
We're not seeing your slide. All we see is click to exit full screen.
You don't see my slides at all?
Well, until recently we saw them all, but this current one is just a big gray click to exit full screen.
Oh, you know what? I'm in PGAdmin. I guess you can't see it. So we'll have to go to the backup slide.
That's what you're doing.
Why do you not see that?
It's probably sharing your browser window, but not your screen.
All right. I don't even, okay. Well, let's try it another way. I was prepared. I'm like Julia Child with that burnt. I dropped the chicken, but I got another one in the oven. So, so I guess the QGIS isn't going to work either, strangely enough. So anyway, if you look through here, this is kind of what I was looking at. Clearly you weren't, but I was talking about how you create your database here, how you create your extension. You need that PostGIS, extension to be able to have the functions. And it's really important, you have it. If you scroll down, your functions will be 0. And once you add your raster extension and your PostGIS extension, you'll have like over 1,000 of these functions that you can use within PGAdmin and also cross database wise in QGIS. And here's my other drop chicken slide in case we can't get into QGIS later. So I'm just going to pause here. It's a hot mess because I wanted everything to be here that I could point to and kind of explain in case you weren't familiar. Now, what you do here, what I'm showing you that's popped out first is setting up your work environment in QGIS, right? So this is how I do it. You might do it somewhat differently, but I like to have my layer styling. Excuse me, can you see it?
Yep, QGIS little screenshot.
Oh, I did. Okay, that was something else. Sorry, it distracted me. There's the processing toolbox. So I just set this up so that I can use it in the way that I like to use it. So the browser window here, I guess you can see the thing moving around, is, it's the mirror of your browser window on your computer. So if you keep all your files in your downloads file, then that's where it's going to be. And you can just bring it in. I usually find what I need and I just pull it right into layers and then it populates. Or you can do the same thing right here. You can create your connection, which I think I'll show you. I think I showed you that on the next slide. But this is where you can work with the data and pull everything in. So once I pull the data in, now I can connect it to my PostgreSQL, and now it lives between the two places. Now, the data that I showed you earlier, the GeoFabric, it'll come into your browser and you're going to see the PBF file. You also have a choice of the shape file, but I'll tell you, the next slide, I'll explain why I don't tend to use the shape files here. But when you open up these folders, you have them arranged by the geometry, which I think is very convenient because sometimes, when you want to look at the polygons, your mind kind of knows what you anticipate the polygon data to look like. The multi-line strings, those are like routes through neighborhoods, the lines, railways, roads, things like that. And then you have your points. And each one of these has their place, especially if you're trying to explore or do some spatial statistics. I like the way this is organized. It works with my mind. And if you open the fields up, this is an example of opening up the multi-polygon field. And you can see the types of column headings that you have here. So you have some information here that you can access. And now see the shapefile. The reason the shapefile kind of gives me pause is that everything is in these little buckets like place of worship, places, railways, points of interest, traffic, which is great. It's great if you really have a specific question, but I kind of like the way the multi-polygonal works because I can pull it over into QGIS, I can create categories, I can color it, I can style it, and then I'm ready to go. Now, here's how you create that connection between the data you just uploaded and that database back over in PGAdmin. You just have to create the connection, and you can call it anything. It doesn't have to be the name of the database. You just have to make sure you refer to the proper database. Here's your local host, unless you're working in an IPS if you have, but I work locally, so that's easy for me. This is the default port. And you can authenticate if you're not the only one using your computer, or if you're using a database that other people have access to. And then down here, I like my tables that have no geometry to be listed because I like having some of that non-spatial information that is so important when you're telling a data story. And saving the QGIS projects in the database. These two I always keep checked as well. And I'm trying to see if there's anything else here. And you can actually see how everything was populated. And now, you're connected because when you hit the test connection, it will tell you that you've connected successfully. And then from here, when you add data, all you have to do is refresh. So if you're familiar with this at all, the refresh feature is very, very good. You can execute your SQL right in the window that pops up. You can add new schemas. And this database vacuum, most of you, if you're familiar, you're probably familiar with. I tend not to use it because it takes so long to run, but if you're working, deleting and doing a lot of work in the tables, this is a nice way to condense and get some of that memory back. Now, because we only have a few minutes, together, if you're not that familiar with SQL, I use this when I'm teaching because I think it reminds everybody there's a natural language that progresses with SQL. It's almost the way you're thinking of a problem, and you think about your name attribute, what is it you want to see? You want to see the schools in an area, you want to look at a building, you're looking at land use. So that's kind of the thing you want to select out of that data set. And then it lives in a table. So the from is going to tell you the table, where, like what conditions, where land use equals, water, whatever that might be. And you might want to group it. A lot of times when you look at your data output, when things are grouped, they just make sense. Like I was just looking at hospitals that were restored in 2022. And I wanted to see the names because I wanted to be able to compare them with, another year. So, grouping and having these conditions are very ways to specifically focus what your data output looks like and how it is when you visualize it. Very simple example within PGAdmin, you do have a graphical interface there. So when you're looking at your data, you have the ability to kind of write your code, your SQL, it's not code, your syntax, run it, and then take a look. So here was kind of what I was talking about. And then I use aliases, so I don't have to write this thing out every time. There's the alias, we're looking at schools. And if you look here, you can see where the majority of the schools are going to be located near the most populated area for the most part. And I decided I dropped it onto a black background. So you could look at the 2022 and you see a lot of these blue dots more dispersed throughout the island of Puerto Rico. And then you move over here and there's not so many in 2019. We're still recovering from that 2017. It did take a while. We had power outages, another earthquake, and then another hurricane to contend with. So these are just ways you can kind of just drop in and look at locations of interest. I did make a little video here. Please let me know if you don't see it running. Okay, here we go.
Works.
Now, you see it? Oh, good. The big thumb. So what we're looking at here is I'm on an island, so I had to record this, but it still has some lag in it. But when you're looking here, this is where your data is. I'm just kind of showing you how you go into the browser and you pull your data in so that you can view, you can visualize it. What you do with OpenStreetMap, if you don't realize this, is you can kind of just create it, pull it on to use OpenStreetMap, visualize it, and then restrict your analysis to the canvas. And we're not looking at this right now, but if you look up here at OpenStreetMap, that's quick OSM. If you pull up a map and create like the layer, the canvas extent that you want, you can actually pull data in that way as well. So what I'm just showing you, what I'm showing you is that this is how you do it. But what I tend to do is just drag it. I have multiple monitors in my office. So when I'm working, I can just take another monitor and drag that information in, and then it populates inside the layer window here. And then you have the data that you can visualize. And over here on the right side, we have the multi-polygon highlighted. Oh, now I'm going to show you a little code, and you can style it over here on the right. But what I'm showing you over here is, using the import, you can use the import vector layer that we did here. You can select a schema. So now I'm pulling that data using the database manager to pull that data in. So this is another way you can use. I always create my spatial index. I convert everything to lowercase because although it's not case sensitive, it makes your data cleaner. And then what we're looking at over here is the story I'm looking at. Is I'm looking for all land use that's industrial in my data set from the multi-polygons 2022. And you can look here and see there's 305 rows available for me. And as you know, you can load it in, and then you could add a layer onto your canvas, and then you're able to view it inside QGIS. Now, I think I'm going to go also, I guess I don't need to talk over what I'm showing you if it's not, oh, I'm going to write a little, I'm going to take a nap here. Look, I write this code. This is very telling. Look what happens with the code. I guess I dozed off. I just had a whole bunch of Z's. What I'm showing you here is just how easy it is just to write a very, very simple query right in here. And then you can add this. This isn't the one I'm going to add to the canvas, but just showing you what I love about Database Manager is how it self-populates. You probably have the setting in PGAdmin 4, but this one is so, to me, is so intuitive. And anything that can help you when you're sorting through big data, like if you're using, census data, this right here is the OSM data, obviously, but, sometimes when you're sifting through large combined data sets, just having a little hand sometimes is very, very helpful when you're trying to write the code. And this will execute pretty darn quickly here. And then I want to show you one more thing, and then we'll go to another video really quickly. I did video here because I wasn't sure, and I'm glad I did, because maybe you wouldn't have been able to see it if I tried to do it live. Now, the next thing what I'm going to do is show you, which, I use a lot now. If you're new to coding, it can be very, very helpful to actually get some SQL prompts when you're trying to fill out the code. And let me see when I should be moving over there. Oh, here, I'm not showing you. So this, you see the little SQL tag right there is taking you to the query builder, which a lot of people, I know a lot of people avoid it, but if you can go in here and select your data, you can select your table, it'll show you all the tables that you have available, and then it shows you all the columns. So if you click on the column, it just adds it into the window. So you can add your views. I take the 10 off because I can never remember what the columns are, especially with these big data sets. But now I can see all my columns. It's a nice, easy way to not have to right click on properties, not try to keep track of what the attributes are. They're right here in this window, and you can easily, quickly build your query the right way. And the reason I like this too is if you're new, this really enforces better habits. And it teaches you the structure of the query language because you have functions, you have string functions, there's operators in here. And what you end up with is the code displaying for you that you can now run. And we're going to run this. I don't know why I made a goof, but I fixed it. And so you're going to run this. And what's really interesting, I'm going to show you really quickly how to add this to the canvas. We'll look at it and then we'll move on. But you have to go down to this column with unique values where you see the cursor, and you have to check the ones that you want, or you'll not be able to view this. And your geometry column has to be selected, and give it a layer name, especially if you're building these out. Like if you don't build out the names in a way that are intuitive, you're going to be in trouble when you try to go back and look at this. So you update the SQL layer, it'll all be added on there now that it's updated and it's in the system. You can now it's live. You can go to the little information button. You can get some information on some of these areas. And, this is a very useful tool. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to go past, I think, the next one. Wait, this is a short one. This is like a few seconds. So let's just take a look real quick, because this is showing you what the data looks like when it's being displayed. So you have the data all set up, and what I'm looking at here is the difference between the residential 2022 and the 2019. Now, this is just a visual, an exploratory. Now, you would want to use some spatial statistics to see, like, are these touching, are they containing, are these areas different areas, the same areas, expansions of the original areas? So this is where you look and you generate and formulate your question to figure out what's different between 2022 and 2019, how much growth is there seen? This is where you can do the calculations and quantify what you're looking at visually. And, this is what I was going to try to do for you live. I don't think it's going to work. So I'm going to do it here, and then we'll try it. And then we'll be, we'll have time for questions if you're not able to see my QGIS actual screen live. But this is what I was talking about, the plugin for Quick OSM that many of you are probably familiar with. If you load the plugin in and you click on it, it was in the upper left corner when I was demonstrating. It's just like a little magnifying glass. And you can also get OSM data, but this is like you can't pick like the different archival years and things like that, the best of my knowledge, but you can pick, you can pick a key, and then you have all the options that list here. And I'll just tell you, in case I can't show you, you have options here where you can do the layer extent, the canvas extent. There's lots of things to limit. What I try to do, especially, if it's a lot of data and I'm doing it locally, is just make sure that I'm looking at a specific area, and then it'll load the data just for what's visible on your canvas, not the whole, environment of the layer. And then what I do down here is inherently, is it a point, a line, a multi-string? The better you can focus the query, the faster it will run. I always change this to 2000, which is the maximum. And then it'll run. And then once it runs, it ends up as being a temporary layer on your canvas. And then you can make it permanent, but you can work with it and decide, if you save it, it'll be permanent. If you try to close that project down without saving it, QGIS does remind you, you have temporary layers. Do you want to save them? And let me see if the QGIS will come up. If not, that's my last slide, but let's take a look and see. Can you see it, Paul?
Are you just sharing applications or your whole screen? Because you may just need to reshare and just pick QGIS as the application.
Oh, can you tell me really quickly how to do that? Oh, shut down the
just stop sharing the current screen and then do it again. And when it asks you what applications to share, pick QGIS.
Look at you, smart girl. I haven't done 100 of these this week and I still don't know. So now you can see QGIS.
Yeah.
All right, let's just spend just a second because if there's any questions, I want to be able to address them. But I already built this out, like, again, with the drop chicken and the one in the oven. If you don't know Julia Child, that's totally like not making any sense to you. But what I did was I went into Quick right here. And I asked for power lines. I asked for highways and motorways. And it loaded in and it ended up what you see over here. So you see this over here. These are those little temporary flags I was telling you about that you would see that you have to make permanent. But what's kind of cool, you know, with this all set up is like, maybe I want to look at the power lines. And there they are, you know, in Puerto Rico. So I want, and obviously, you know, you move on to the spatial statistics. You can look at the distance between things, which is great. You can find out if these are active, if they're not active. You know, I wanted to add motorways. I want to see where the roads are in the area as well. Maybe I'm looking at modern day industrial areas and where they're located. And even, you know, I'm usually even more interested in where the residential places are. And this is all 2022. And, you know, you go into neighborhoods and you can see the impact that the built infrastructure has on health outcomes, on the communities that live there themselves, you know, walkable sidewalks, impervious surfaces, lots of asphalt, you know, maybe not being, you know, located under high power lines. You know, we have studies that show that's not good for your health, being close to roads, being close to, you know, without a lot of tree cover. Those are sorts of questions we ask when we look at persistent barriers for better health, better outcomes, better opportunities, and to make things a little more equitable. So I just wanted to take you into these areas and show you what you can do very quickly, just an exploratory way. When you have your PostGIS, you can write your code. This was all generated from SQL code, by the way. And, you know, I guess, you know, I can end there and we can see if there's any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bonnie. Encourage anyone to put the questions into the chat or the Q&A. I have my question is sort of like, you've gone through and learned this stuff and you're one of these rare people with the self-awareness to recognize what you're learning so you can actually write it down afterwards, which is impressive. Generally speaking, we don't know what we don't know, or don't know what we know. Where do you tell folks who are coming to this fresh, like, what is the best starting point for folks who are arriving in this field, fresh and new and minty?
That's a good one. Mine started with this is a hopeful story for people that are new and are like, oh, I'm never going to get through it. Mine started with, was it GeoPython? I can't remember the name of the conferences. I spoke at so many last year, but I saw one single introduction to Google Earth Engine. And I was like, how in the world? And I just was hooked. Dr. Wu from the University of Tennessee. I credit him I acknowledged him in my book because he opened my mind. And if you're lucky enough to find one of these well-seasoned people that, you know, produce, you know, the videos on YouTube, and, you know, the ironic thing was he was so thorough in how he told these stories about Google Earth Engine and how to access the information and why it was so important and how to write Python code and all of that, that a year to the day almost I was asked and I presented at the same conference because, you know, I had just hit the ground running. You just really have to find a tribe. You have to find like-minded people. I'm also an ultra runner, and I always think that my ultra runner community and my geospatial community are not all that different. You know, we support each other. We know how hard it is. We know, you know, the ups, the downs, the secrets. And that's why the book I wrote was not the book I could find anywhere. I wanted to share some of the stories and the, you know, little insights that I found as a newbie, you know, as somebody who was self-trained in some of these things. So I like that question because no matter how technical I am, sometimes when I present, everyone comes back to like, what hair product do you use? And like, where do you get your data? And I really like your glasses. So, I'm just giving the people what they want, Paul.
That's